All right, here we go. We're ready? Okay. Hello, my name is Chris Cooley. I'm here to speak to you today about Taoism and the Kabbalah and magic and chaos and how they're all interrelated. And I'm not here to sell anything. You know, this is like essentially a perspective, but it's something that has affected me enough to make me want to be sharing it with you. So, that being said, the loose title of this lecture is The Sexual Mysteries Beyond Good and Evil, and where these concepts even come from, essentially, and how to escape them as well. So, let's get started. I just want to, reiterate that everything that I'm going to be talking about is essentially a perspective. It's not, I'm not going to claim anything as fact necessarily. I actually more hope to open your mind up to the possibilities that not anything is as factual as you might think it is. And so when I'm showing you what I'm going to be showing you, I'll be showing you various perspectives on things, and even the symbols and the words I'm using are all metaphors in and of themselves anyway. But I just want you to remember that it all is. Beyond the gate of experience flows the way, or what we're going to call this evening the Tao, which is ever greater and more subtle than the world. This comes from the Tao Te Ching, which is written by Lao Tzu, which may have been more than one person. It's probably at least 3 people. But this is, 2,500 years ago, and it was inspired by the I Ching. But in and of itself, it's the philosophical representation of the Tao. And because the Tao and Taoism, and its methods were around, prior to that. And, as long as we've been around, or conscious at least. I'm going to talk a lot about metaphors, because you're going to learn that, more and more that pretty much everything's a metaphor. There's not really any such thing as a projector, but this is a word we're using for this device. And even along those lines, it's specifically metaphoric that we're using this type of projector as well, because I'm trying to help you make some things transparent. We're going to talk a lot about symbols as well, because symbols are more connected with everything than you might think. This is a definition from the second new international edition of Merriam-Webster's Dictionary, which is a super beautiful dictionary, by the way. I highly recommend finding one if you can. Arcanum, a chest, a box, a secret, a mystery, usually in plural. An extract of the ulterior or vital nature of something, a powerful natural agent, an elixir, so used by Paracelsus. Hence, a secret and marvelous remedy, an elixir. Or, arcanorum, mystery of mysteries. Specifically, the one ultimate secret supposed to lie behind all astrology, alchemy, and magic. Now, this is basically what we're going to be talking about, and it can refer to many different things, as we're going to go over. The Kabbalah, which is Hebrew for receiving, is interconnected with that. The tarot is also interconnected with that, and the tarot and the Kabbalah are interconnected with each other, as is the Hebrew alphabet, the Phoenician alphabet, a lot of, the I Ching. It's essentially the science that makes up the world we experience. But since it's not something concrete, it's something that gets represented in a lot of different metaphors. It's even the arc in and of itself these pillars can kind of be representative of the Kabbalah in and of themselves. And when you learn, just how much of a video game this all is, you start to understand why we call them arcades. Because all these things are preparing you for life and for transcending life, which is the real life. Secret. Now, the Arcanum, as referred to as, like the big secret, the answer to everything, but it's really not that big of a secret. It's something you know, and it's not necessarily anyone else hiding it from you either. It's an aspect of ourselves. Like if you've ever seen the movie Memento, when he's going through his notes, he's like, "Who's blacked out all these pages? Who's blacked out these pages?" Well, he has. These are the things that we've hidden from ourselves, but it's not even like a bad thing or an evil thing necessarily. It's part of the game, and that's part of what you learn to understand. Your ego is, essentially what, shaitan or Satan comes from, which is the adversary. And it's not a bad thing in and of itself anyway, because your adversary is what helps you rise to, greater heights. So without an adversary, without the Joker, Batman wouldn't be Batman. It's kind of how it works. But, these words in and of themselves give you hints of where to go. We're also going to talk about science and the concept of science. Now, what a lot of scientists forget, that the Hermeticists knew, which is where science comes from, is that there's no such thing as an objective reality. The observer is not separate from the observation. Like how you look at something literally changes it. Now everybody else might be changing it as well, but it's still affected by how you see it more than anything. The image you see, like even me, I'm in your head right now. I'm, the visual, the image is a manifestation of your brain and your, chemistry and your history and your, everything going on in your head. It's not necessarily what's actually here. And that goes for how you interpret what I say, how you hear what I say, all these things. We're also going to talk about knowledge and what to know comes from, and how we use this word consciously and subconsciously, to mean different things. And we're especially going to be touching on the biblical aspect of the word, which coincidentally happens to be the number 8, which we'll get to later. But, in the biblical sense, to know someone is to have sex with them. And you can now start to see what the tree of knowledge is all about. And you bear in mind that in the biblical sense, to know someone is to have sex with them. What is the tree of knowledge referring to then? But we'll come back to that. Part of the science of Magick and metaphysics and even philosophy is learning how to see the whole picture. Because we have this very fragmented perspective of how things are and what we experience and how we like things to be, all these things, without really factoring in everything else going on and how interconnected everything is. But at the same time, the world in reality as we perceive it is far more an abyss than we currently accept or talk about, at least. This we'll come back to as well. But the main reason we're here is to talk about Kabbalah. This is what's known as the Tree of Life. Now, if you're watching this video or if you're here, you've probably heard of this. what you may or may not have realized is that there are two fairly different models of the tree of life being used out there. Now, what is the difference between these two trees? And why are there two trees? And if this is such a, mystical, perfect science, why are there discrepancies everywhere? Why are there discrepancies between, the Hasids and the Western Magick tradition? Why are there, differences between all the different alchemical associations with the Sephira? Why are there differences between the paths? All these things. And that's what we're going to talk about. But one thing that you should keep in mind is a part of the perfection of the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life is that it is imperfect. Because it being imperfect allows for infinite possibility. And this is chaos. This is part of what we're going to touch on. And chaos is a lot closer to God than anything else, or than a lot of what we perceive as God. Now, it says in the Zohar, and in the Sefer Yetzirah, I guess, that there are 10. It's very specific about there being 10 Sephira. So why would anyone even claim the Da'ath exists? This hidden Sephira exists. And the reason is, Da'ath is all the other Sephira at the same time. The Christmas tree from the Germanic tradition represents this. And the illuminated tree is through Da'ath. But Da'ath is also the tree of knowledge. Now these different paths on the tree, which are represented here by the Hebrew characters, can also be represented by tarot. And the different Hebrew characters all correlate with the tarot cards. And this is what's known as the Great Arcanum. This goes back to the book of Thoth, supposedly, in ancient Alchemite. Some say it came from Europe in the 15th century. But either way, the Hebrew Arcanum goes back much further than any of these European tarot cards. And the Phoenician alphabet, which a lot of it is based on, goes back even further than that. So, but that doesn't mean it doesn't apply, because it totally does, and it's the same set of symbols, and it's the same science of symbology. This is, by the way, Paul Foster Case's Tree of Life. He's done a lot of amazing work, but personally, I am of the school of thought that this is the true tree. These two paths, I don't think really exist. Now, I've heard a couple, different explanations of this. Some people say this is the tree before the fall, and this is the tree after the fall, which totally makes sense. But when you've actually experienced leaving Malkuth, or Terra, or Earth, you understand this is the only path. Now, I'm going to talk a lot about Taoism, because Taoism correlates with this stuff more so than you could possibly believe. And in fact, Taoist and Chinese medicine and Hasidic medicine are more closely interrelated than you might think. And are actually more closely related to Comitian medicine than you would believe at first. So, what is the Tree of Life about? It's about ascension. It's about a lot of things. This is a representation of the body. This is a representation of the soul. This is a representation of the universe. It represents many things. But what we're going to focus on now is going up the path. And a lot of schools of Kabbalah will teach you about going down the tree, and like the snake, the lightning bolt, all these things. That's not what we're focusing on. We are focusing on what in Taoism is called the center path. If you've ever studied Wing Chun, everything's about coming from your center. And since this is about you, it's that much appropriate to be balanced and be coming from your center. And if you notice, even though these two trees have many differences as far as the paths that they offer you and the symbology of these paths, you'll notice that the Taoist is the same on both of them. And there's many reasons for this. Now the Taoist, or Tao, you'll notice right away, sounds a lot like Tao, as in Tao, as in. And I think this is one of very many beautiful synchronicities that you're going to encounter the deeper you get into this stuff. And part of the reason we're going to talk about chaos magic is that chaos magic explains synchronicity in a way that nothing else does. And it's because, okay, yes, there is chaos, but part of the magic, part of, God or whatever is cubing that chaos and turning it into form. And that's part of what you do on a daily basis. This is all like particles dancing in the air that you turn into this image. And that's your receiving. Just like these cameras are receiving the image, but at the same time it's a masculine thing too, because it's an active force recording as well. And the way the masculine and feminine interact is going to be the basis of what we're talking about here. And it's not just on an external level, that's on an internal level as well. Because you have energetic polarities going through your body that are positive and negative, active, passive, masculine, feminine, whatever you want to call it. Now, the T, the Tao, in and of itself, is a symbol of sex. The horizontal line represents the female principle, the feminine. The vertical line represents the masculine. You'll see this represented in many different ways. Even the Christian cross is the masculine principle and the feminine principle. And this goes back, this goes way back. And you will start to see the symbology more and more once you start to understand that sex is in all things. This is not anything dirty. This is not anything you've learned from, especially from church, but your schools or parents or anything either. Part of the Tao, is understanding the yin and yang, the masculine and feminine, the ida and pingala in all things and how they're interacting. And that's the active force and the passive force within and without in all things. And once you understand this more, you will start to see everything kind of fall into place and kind of make sense. Now, we're going to cover a lot of ground here, and that's part of why we're filming this, so you can go back later and look at the visuals or rehear things, whatever, but we got a lot to cover, so we're just going to plow through it. I also think it's pretty fun happenstance that in Arabic, this is represented by a smiley face. Now, in Hebrew, the Tav often represents truth. It is the last character in the word truth. In fact, in the Czech story, the golem, the word that brought the golem to life was truth, emet. And then the one that killed him is when they erased the aleph and left met, which means dead. But part of the beauty of the Hebrew language, which is the Great Arcanum, is all the magic inherent in it. What killed the golem? It took the air out. The Aleph, in and of itself, represents air. So when you cut the air out, it can't live anymore, and it's dead. Coming back to the Tao, which in Chinese literally means the way, symbolized by this symbol nowadays. This is an older seal script version. And I think it's pretty fun happenstance also how similar this kind of looks to the Omkar. The absolute principle underlying the universe, combining itself with the principles of yin and yang and signifying the way, or code of behavior that is in harmony with the natural order. This is exactly what we're going to talk about. The Tao in and of itself is the way. So you will, of course, want to strive to be on the way that is within the natural order of things. And especially in this time and place, where things are so out of balance, and they will be increasingly more so until people learn to balance themselves internally first. Then they can help bring harmony to the outer world. This is a Chinese word meaning way, path, route, or sometimes more loosely, doctrine or principle. Now remember, principle in and of itself can be referring to the sex organs, the masculine principle and the feminine principle. In all its uses, Tao is considered to have ineffable qualities that prevent it from being defined or expressed in words. It can, however, be known or experienced, and its principle, which can be discerned by observing nature, can be followed or practiced. Much of East Asian philosophy writing focuses on the value of adhering to the principles of the Tao and the various consequences of failing to do so. Now, even in these words that are used, you can understand that there's a sexual nature to things, because, clearly there's a sexual nature to nature. That's how everything happens. That's how things reproduce themselves. But, as we get into a little more of the depth of psychology, you'll start to understand that all things are created from the sexual drive. Someone invented, this machine, to impress the opposite sex, or to impress someone, for those purposes. That might not be an overtly sexual, physical thing, but it can be an internal, emotional, spiritual thing as well. And again, there's nothing dirty about any of this. We need to totally rethink our entire system of how we perceive the world. What is good? What is evil? Good is essentially God, right? Well, then what is evil? Well, you can't spell evil, or you can't say it at least, without Eve. So what is Eve's ill? Is it Eve's illness? It is. But it's also Eve's illumination. And now you can start to see the dual nature of things. Even in the Tao, it says the one gave birth to the two, which gave birth to the three, which gave birth to all things. Because you need the illness to have the illumination. It's like Goulart always said, stay sick. This is what he's talking about. Or it's, no wonder that slang, ill, is a good thing. It means something's dope, it's tight. Because it's illuminating. It comes from the root ili, which means light. Thanks to William Henry. As I mentioned before, Kabbalah translates literally to receiving. Now, part of the reason Kabbalah has always been so hush-hush, part of the reason this is in and of itself a symbol for Kabbalism or mysticism, it's not because, it's not okay to talk about it. It's because you need to, in order to hear the response. Because you're talking to God all the time, but no one ever shuts up to listen. Now, God might be talking through one of your friends or through someone you know, but everyone's always just waiting to talk themselves as opposed to shh and listen. This means quieting the mind as well, so you can actually receive the messages. Look at the ear in and of itself. Is it just me, or does this have a pretty vaginal nature to it in and of itself? This even looks like it's fit for a penis. And this is literally what is happening when you are hearing. You are the receiving. You are the receiver. You are the feminine, allowing the masculine in. But part of the suppression of the goddess and the suppression of the woman is within us ourselves. This is not just in the world. Oh, we're not like treating women fairly or something. You're not treating your own inner woman fairly, your own inner feminine nature, the Ida. And that's why nobody listens. And you'll see, especially in Hebrew, more and more the H, the he, which is, a feminine character in and of itself disappearing. And when you start putting it back, you will get messages. While we're on this image, I just want to mention that part of the reason this is such a powerful symbol is that this symbol in and of itself is the cross. You hex someone, right, with the cross. That's exactly what you're doing. Remember this, the horizontal line is the feminine principle. This is a vagina. And then the finger is the masculine principle. This is a penis. And it's crossing them, and that's why it's such a powerful symbol. That's why you can get someone to shut up so quickly, so easily. Whether they know you or not, or they're used to the custom or whatever, it's because it's magic. And the more you learn about magic, which is absolutely real, the more you'll understand it's very connected with the sexual mysteries. Now, as we mentioned, Kabbalah is inextricably connected with the Torah. So the Kabbalah is the soul of Judaism, and that the Torah is the heart. The five looks the most, and we'll come back to the five. So the five in and of itself is a representation of the microcosm, or man, and everything man-sized and smaller. Because you are the universe in and of yourself. You are a reflection of the universe. And everything outside of you is inside of you as well. And that's why the better care you take of everything inside of you, the better care you're taking of everything outside of you as well. I use that word again, arcana, the arc, all right? 2 + 2 is the 4, just like the 4-letter word of God, which we'll come into later and talk a lot more about. Even the minor arcanum, which correlates with the sephira, the circles, as opposed to the paths on the tree of life. 5 + 6 is 11, which is the number of sephira on the tree of life we're going to be working with. Both played many vital and prominent roles, in Egyptian mythology, such as maintaining the universe. In later history of ancient Egypt, Thoth became heavily associated with the arbitration of godly disputes, the arts of magic, the system of writing, the development of science, and the judgment of the dead. Now, Thoth is not only connected with the tarot, he is represented by Hermes in Greek culture and Mercury in Roman culture later. And that's why the Hermetics, which is where the word Hermetic comes from, call him Hermes Trismegistus, thrice great Hermes, because they're pulling 3 gods into one, and God emanates in 3 ways anyway. But this is a specific God, which is to give you connection to God. There is only one God, one love, right? Jah, which we'll come to later. But at the same time, as the Kabbalah shows us in itself, God represents itself in different ways. And you can go to a specific energy to gain, specific knowledge or power or whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. But we're going to focus on getting more connected with the God, and the God is that force, which is the sexual force as well. But it's why we do everything we do, because it's why we're here on this planet also. And it's not to reproduce. Reproducing, you're taking that energy and all your chances and then putting that on someone else. Now, the whole reason that you have a kid, if you have a kid, is so that they can teach you what you've forgotten. Now, you can push all your crap on your kid all you want, but whether you like it or not, especially if they're born within the last 10 or 20 years, they probably know more than you do, but a lot. And that's because of the pineal gland. And now this is commonly called the third eye, but when you learn about how the brain develops, you find out it's actually your first eye. It's the first eye that develops in your brain. Then these two come about, and then you have all three. So again, the one gives birth to the two gives birth to the three gives birth to all things. And this is from the Tao, but this is represented in the three supernals of the Kabbalah as well. Another definition of the Tao: an unconditionable and unknowable source and guiding principle of all reality as conceived by Taoists. Now, this unconditional and unknowable source, this is part of chaos, but this is also the sexual drive. The process of nature by which all things change and which is to be followed for a life of harmony. Again, there's that word, nature. Now, nature is interchangeable with God. All things exist because of nature. That's why they're here. But what is nature? Nature is the natural way of things. But what is unnatural? Well, nothing's unnatural because everything came from nature. So again, this is the whole good and bad thing that is all an illusion. Here's a representation of the Tao just in the world we live in. Okay, the Yang, or the Yang, the masculine energy, is represented by the clouds and the sun. Now the feminine energy, the Yin energy, is represented by the earth and the water. Now this is represented in the Western esoteric tradition as fire, air, earth, and water. And this, in and of itself, is God. This is even where the Christian God comes from, which we'll get to soon. And the yin-yang is a powerful symbol. Alan Watts brought to my attention that when you look at it from overhead, it's actually the double helix, which is in and of itself Jacob's ladder, or the way to heaven. And you can see just in the yin-yang, the one, or the null, the zero, giving birth to the two, giving birth to the three, which is all three existing all at once. There's two sides to the coin. There's also split down the middle where it's both sides and neither side. So, this path of Tav on the tree of life, trying to get us up the ladder, is represented in the tarot as the world. See the Tav right here. And again, you can see the four elements, the four archangels, which in and of themselves are the forces of God, which we'll come back to later. And you can also see the Kabbalah represented in every tarot card, the tree of life. Here's the two pillars, the masculine principle, the feminine principle, and there's a reason that this is an androgynous character in the middle. There's a reason you cannot see the genitals, because there's both and neither. And as we just discussed, Tao is the world. It's the world we live in. So, once we've established the Tao, we come to Yesod, which is Hebrew for the foundation. Now, when you align the tree of life with the body, which, yes, it is absolutely for, Yesod very clearly ends up on the sexual organs. So how appropriate that it be called the foundation now that we've established what the way is. You know, these are what's called the generative principle, the generative organs. And that's where Genesis comes from. This is represented in the Western esoteric tradition by the moon. And Yesod, just like the moon, reflects the light of the sun and the rest of the galaxy. It's our satellite to everything else. This is our path from Earth, Malkuth, and the disk that we stand on, to the rest of the galaxy. Now, what is the moon? What is Yesod? Now, if we've established that the center pillar is sex, as the right pillar is the masculine pillar, and the left pillar is the feminine pillar, then what is the moon? What is the first step you take when you discover your sexuality? Generally, it's masturbation. And that's why the moon, which comes from, you know, like Mount Sinai, you know, the moon cult, that's where sin comes from. You know, anything that's a sin, right? It feels good because you're not supposed to be doing it. And that's why you're not supposed to be doing it, it's just so that it feels good. And now you start to understand the nature of good and bad. Why do you think that, you know, ever since the 90s, you know, slang, you know, oh, that's bad, that it means a good thing. Because they're trying to tell you, they're trying to show you, this is how all things work. Everything is perspective. You know, the famous Taoist painting, the soup tasters, you know, which had these three old Chinese men tasting this, like, cauldron of soup. And the first one's just like, doesn't like it at all. And he's supposed to represent Buddhism, right? Life is suffering, you know? And sure, if you want to look at it that way. Now the second one, it's not quite sure what to make of it. And he's still thinking about it. It's like, he's on the fence. And he's supposed to represent Confucianism, you know, which even though in and of itself sounds like confused. Now you're going to learn that English is the most magical language, and it's because it's the culmination of all these languages, and there's so many hints at these things in and of the words. So, the third old man, third old man tasting the soup, has this like huge shitty grin on his face, like, it's the best soup I've ever had. And he represents the Tao. Now, they're all eating the same soup. So why is the Taoist smiling? And it's because he understands this is the soup. You better enjoy it. Why not? And this is part of how perspective rules everything. You are your thought. The entire world is what you create with your thoughts. So, if we want to move on up the ladder, and by the way, say, as we go up, we'll show you going back down as well, because everything goes up and down, left and right, and that's what we're talking about. It also shows why Malkuth is dropped. This is the seed spilled. This is, evolution, de-evolution. And we're doing it at all times. Now, moving on up, the next character is Resh. Now this essentially means head in Hebrew. Let's see, I'm looking for my slide here. There we go. This is also often short for rabbi. This is also the letter for Ra, and it is the equivalent of the Greek character for Rho, which is part of the Chi Rho, which was the original symbol for Christ. Now, the Resh, or Ra, is even in the word Israel, because it represents exactly what it sounds like. It represents Ra. And again, some Hebrew magic for you. Israel, or Israel, is not, well, clearly it's a physical place now, but that is not what the word means. Freeing Israel from slavery of Egypt is freeing the mind and the soul, which is the Trinity. Isis, Ra, and El. Now, the Tifra that we land in, or the Sifra that we land in, is Tiferet, which means beauty. This is also the Sephiroth that connects to all the rest of the Tree of Life. And now, this is the most common Sephiroth associated with sex. Now, say the Yesod, the sin, the moon represents discovering your sexuality. Then what is the evolution, right? Finding a partner, especially one that connects to you. This is often associated with the solar plexus or the heart. Well, the solar plexus is the sun, so what are we talking about here, right? Now, how do we get there? Okay, Resh, Ra, the head. What does that mean? This is represented in the tarot as temperance. This is not the Hebrew character that Paul Foster Case associates with it, but for our purposes today, it will work. You can see the fire and the water here. It's balance. It's balancing things out. It's, what does it say in the Oracle of Delphi? Know thyself, and you'll know the universe and its gods. What are they talking about? Masturbation is one of the things they're talking about. But what's the very next line in the Oracle of Delphi? Nothing to excess. And they're not only talking about nothing to excess as far as drugs, which includes the orgasm. They're talking about nothing, the null, the void, to excess. The more you void yourself, like Moses parting the waters, right? The more you clear your ego and your garbage out of your head, the more room you have to receive. And you are a receiver. There's, the analogy of the right brain and the left brain, used a lot these days. I like to essentially, claim the left brain is like, your computer, all right? It's what you've got on your hard drive, it's what you're working with, it's all, etc. Now your right brain, your subconsciousness, is essentially like the internet, It's all that pool of stuff that everyone has access to, How well you perceive it depends on how good of a connection you have. But it's filtered through your left brain, which is your actual computer as well. How well your processor works, how clean your hard drive is, all these things. But the more you use it, the more you learn the internet, that right brain consciousness, it connects you to everything a lot faster than anything else can. And it's mind-blowing. So, if Tiferet is the beauty that connects to all things, then why would we even want to leave it? isn't that where we'd want to stay? Right? If that's represented by the sun, like, why would we want to leave that? Well, you don't have to. And that's part of what the center path and Doth especially is about. So once you've discovered, your sexuality, right? And then once you've discovered a partner that you can share your heart with, well then what's the next step? And why is it so hard getting to whatever that next step is, right? Now with Kabbalah, this is represented, we have Keter up here. Even on this one, like this is the next step. This translates to the crown. Well, what does that even mean? Is that God? So we're trying to get to God. Is that heaven? So we're trying to get to heaven. One of the first things I guess it wasn't one of the first things for me, but a Mason friend told me that one of the first things he heard about the Tree of Life was Keter is to Malkuth, Malkuth is to Keter. Now this is something that keeps coming back, but one of the understandings I have found for it now is, okay, if this is sex, and you strive for the crown, or if this is anything and you strive for the crown, you get stuck back in the kingdom. So why would you strive for the crown if you're going to get stuck back in the kingdom? And this is part of what Doth represents as well. There are alternatives. And these are part of the things that have been hidden from you, but they've been hidden from you by you. Because it's all out there, especially now. All the shit's out there. That's how I got it. I mean, it found me and it'll find you when you're ready for it, and I imagine it has if you're watching this. So, what is better than sex? Now, if you've ever been in love, and you've made love to someone you're in love with, that's very different from just getting off, right? Which is like you saw, right? The sin. You show this alchemical one. Purpose. Right? Well, then when you get your heart involved, and it's that much more intense, okay? Then where do you go? And how come, if you found that before, how come it never lasts? Where does it go? You can have like such intense, heavy love, like, oh my God, I'm gonna love you forever, and then where does it go? Well, you let it out. And this is part of the problem. We are living unsustainable lives externally as well as internally. And we've totally been fooled as to how our body works. Because most people in our culture don't have the foggiest clue. They have misconceptions, which they've experienced works only so well, but they've completely forgotten about the time when there was nothing compared to how things were. And this is part of the problem too. We've been born into slavery. And when you were born into slavery, how do you know what freedom is like? Freedom is a myth, but at the same time, when you've experienced it, you understand the power of myth. And myth is more real than reality in a lot of ways. So there's certainly nothing wrong with myth. So if there's something better, and it must not be Keter, if you're just going to end up back in Malkuth, the kingdom, right? Then it must be here somewhere. But why is this missing? Why is this hidden? What do people not want to know about? What do we not want to know about? Because again, it's just us hiding this stuff. Well, let's look at the tree of life here. This character is Dalet. This is from Castian Simon's book in the Esoteric Hebrew Tarot. This represents the door. The door. The door to what? Now, another fun synchronicity is that modern Hebrew spells door as Dalet instead of Dalet, which looks a hell of a lot like delete. Now, maybe it looks like delete because someone deleted the door. Where'd it go? Well, it's always there, you know. We just need to remember. We need to remember why we're here and what we're doing. Now this, in and of itself, gives you a nice hint. It says geometry of the doorway. Well, what on earth does that mean? But in geometry, you can find hints. Now, again, this is all metaphor. But say we took these three geometric concepts, these trigonometry concepts, and applied them to the tree of life. So, if sin is Yesod, then what's Tifereth? Cause line? Adjacent lines? When you have a cause, when you're going parallel with someone? Okay, that works. Then what is up here? Tangent. What does that mean? It means we're going somewhere else entirely. And that's exactly where we're going. Now this is represented in the tarot. It's the High Priestess. Now this is a very clear symbol of the Kabbalah here. Anytime you see the two pillars, you know there's some Kabbalah shit. And the shit in between is what you gotta focus on. Alright, this is, what it's about. It's understanding the polarities and then how they meet. This is the Trinity. Okay? Now, I like this Paul Foster case deck because it has the Hebrew, right, which is, Yakim and Boaz. But this is a masculine symbol and a feminine symbol, Aleph, Bet. Alright? And this is important. It's important to remember that this is in all things because this is how the world works. And the more you understand this concept and this system, the more you will understand everything. It doesn't matter what you want to do or what you want to experience, it's all in the same science. Now, let's take a look at this word da'ath real quick. Da'ath translates to knowledge. Now, as we have already established, knowledge has to do with sex and the sexual mysteries. So, okay, we're in the center pillar. Makes sense so far. This is translated into Greek as gnosis. Now this is another hint, because gnosis is not just knowledge, gnosis is experiential knowledge. You have experienced something. Now you can look at the tree of life in and of itself, and understand that, okay, this is the wisdom, right? This is which is what Chokmah means, the masculine pillar. This is wisdom, right? And then the feminine pillar, the receiving, is understanding. You gotta receive to understand. But it's the active force that you get wisdom from. But if you don't combine them, you cannot achieve da'ath or gnosis. Now there's all kinds of people that have read all the books, all right? And they fall on here. They know it all, right? Or they want to, but they're too afraid to actually have the experiences. And then there's people that have had plenty of experiences, but don't have the wisdom. And these are people that think they were abducted by aliens, or saw the Virgin Mary, or all these things. These are all myths and analogy and etc. for mysteries. But at the same time, and I'm not knocking anyone's myth compared to anyone else's, but you got to understand that, you know, every time someone goes through this kind of stuff, they think, oh wow, I know the truth, I experienced it. Well, you got to understand, okay, you did experience the truth, but you experienced it subjectively. And that's why all these things apply all at the same time. It's because you experience everything subjectively. Now let's look at this Hebrew right here. This represents door, as we've already established. And this is the way, right? Tau. Then the ayin, what does the ayin represent? It kind of looks like a Y. And there's reason for that too. Remember the flux capacitor in Back to the Future? You know, there's a Y, right? This is the ayin, because this is the door, and this is how you travel back and forth through time and space and dimensions and all these things. This is a very real thing. But again, it's just a metaphor. The ayin represents the eye, or just vision, or just experience. All right, so this is the door to experience. It's the door to experience the way, or the truth. So this is the door to experience the truth. Then what does that mean? Now again, if English is as magical as I think it is, Da'ath immediately looks like death. All you gotta do is flip that A around. And there's reason for that as well, because Da'ath is death. In a literal way, but in a metaphorical way as well. Because you're never the same afterwards. You have died. But it's the ego that's died. And that's part of what Da'ath is surpassing the ego, which is the game that you've built for yourself, which you're trying to escape from. As Robert Anton likes to call it, chapel perilous. This is called Da'at without the H more and more now. It's partially because, remember, hiding the H is suppressing the feminine. But I think this is pretty funny too, because Da means there in a few languages. So it's there at, right? Kind of sounds like Dasein, which, if you're not familiar with Heidegger, he's a German philosopher, doesn't get enough credit. And Dasein is a really beautiful concept. Dasein essentially means living authentically, which is master morality as opposed to slave morality. It's learning things through knowledge and experience yourself and living that way as opposed to the world someone else is creating for you. But if you learn a little German, you understand that Da is there and Sein is being. So, the most important aspect is being there. You got to be there to experience. But another way of looking at this is Das Ein, which is the one. So you might want to meditate on that for a moment, because this is some heavy shit, and this connects exactly with this middle pillar stuff that we're doing. Now, being there and the one, and we're talking about the sexual mysteries, you know, this means being there with your partner, you know, being there, you know, to meet them, being there to be with them, etc. But it's also being there, being present, being here, not in the future, in the past, somewhere else. It's being here. But it's also the one. Now, this is not necessarily, you know, this like Western concept of like, you know, your soulmate, that's like the one person you've always been looking for, and etc. This is a picture painted for you by, films and books and stuff. And it's not that it doesn't apply, but you gotta understand it. You live multiple lives within one lifetime, or you can. The one is also Jah, the one love. And it's opening yourself up to loving all things as yourself, because you are all things. And you have to love yourself enough to love all things in order to open the doorway to Da'ath. This is also represented in Egyptian culture, the Akamite, by the Duat, which is the rivers which flow under the world, right? Like inner earth, the Gartha. These are they represent this by the waters. But this is a powerful symbol because the waters in and of themselves are very symbolic.